already on Twitter or X, you've got the Nintendo is horrible, and then you have the it's finally Yuzu's dying. You have that whole dynamic going on, and all that is irrelevant because at the end of the day, Nintendo is the one who owns the Switch, right? So kill all that noise. Wow, this news is insane for Yuzu. And so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna talk about the end result, and then what I want to do is actually go back through the documents on how we actually got here. And already on Twitter or X, you've got the Nintendo is horrible, and then you have the it's finally Yuzu's dying. You have that whole dynamic going on, and all that is irrelevant because at the end of the day, Nintendo is the one who owns the Switch, right? So kill all that noise. We're gonna dive into here on like how like this happened and if there are any implications moving forward for emulation in general or any other emulators, right? And so Yuzu creators will pay Nintendo $2.4 million in damages and in development of their Switch emulator. Now, right off the rip, $2.4 million is a lot of moolah, okay? Especially for an emulation staff. First, before I go any further than that, is do you think that in the long scope of Yuzu that the damages that Nintendo could or should take as being compensatory for those damages is $2.4 million? Okay, just let that sit there for a second. The answer is no. Okay, for what they're alleging, there will be far more money involved than $2.4 million. So let's see what they have to say about it. And it says the creators of, by Taylor Lyles, by the way, the creators of Yuzu have settled its lawsuit with Nintendo, agreeing to pay $2.4 million in damages and shutting down support for the popular open source Switch emulator. A new document, and we will look at it, reveals that Tropic Haze, that's the company behind Yuzu, will pay Nintendo $2.4 million to settle the lawsuit filed last week. So, this is really quick. Nintendo sued Yuzu's developers in U.S. federal court, alleging that the emulator is now primarily designed, okay, to circumvent several layers of Switch encryption in order to make it possible to play Nintendo games on devices such as Steam Deck. So that's the first part that I wanted to hone in on right there, because that piece right there is what the case is hanging on. Nintendo came to court saying that Yuzu as an emulator is primarily designed, its main purpose, its intent is to circumvent Switch encryption in order to make it possible to play Nintendo's games on devices such as the Steam Deck. It's funny that like this comes to bear as Yuzu was expanding itself to go beyond the desktop environment. At a given point, I think it was like late or mid last year, they started splitting their development. It was always on a PC, and then they split it up, and then they started doing the mobile work for it. This is, for what they're saying, this is what got Nintendo's attention. Now, the reason I'm trying to make this case now and pause on this is because Nintendo had an issue with another development team that sought to move off of the PC space, because Nintendo's aware all this is going on, and that was for the Dolphin emulator, right? The Dolphin devs wanted to make it possible to bring the emulator over to the Steam Deck. or just for Steam in general, but aiming for the Steam Deck, and Nintendo came against that as well. You know, regardless of the reasons for why they like this is we're not cool with that. We're not cool with it in general, but we're definitely not cool with that. So then they bring out the big guns. It says Nintendo argued in its filing that Tropic Haze was liable for the distribution of illegal copies of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, claiming that it had been pirated up to 1 million times before release. Specifically, the filing claimed that Yuzu's Patreon page allowed its developers to earn $30,000 a month by providing subscribers with daily updates, early access, and special unreleased features to games like Tears of the Kingdom. So now that right there is so wild. First, Nintendo puts the responsibility of others pirating the game to play it on their PCs or whatever on the development team, right? They're saying Tropic Haze is responsible for them not getting 1 million sales of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. You have to understand, like, so they're saying the reason that's the case is because Yuzu, of course, they have a Patreon, right? If you pay to have access to that level of access and support for the emulator, you are getting you're getting a client that's pushed out earlier than everyone else. Now, the reason that's important is because that paid level of support in particular does not grant you exclusive access to that build of the client. It just gives you support for that build of the client, right? So, in other words, when they come out with the early access version, truly anyone can go and mess with that early access version. But if you're in their Discord, if you don't have that support level, you will not be serviced for using the early access version of it. Now, the way that this is being argued here, according to this article, is that Nintendo was like, hey, y'all are getting $30,000 a month, and you guys have quote unquote special unreleased features that are making it possible to then turn around and pirate Tears of the Kingdom. So it's making the case that their Patreon and how they presented it is the main reason, and that's what I told somebody on X on Twitter earlier, that Nintendo is taking issue with how they are conducting their business with their material, right? Even though it's an emulator, because Yuzu's been around, Nintendo is aware of Yuzu, but you know, this glaringness right here with Tears of the Kingdom, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. 30 grand a month, right? So they were like, hey, that's 30 grand. I wonder how many of those folks could have got a Switch, or could have, went and bought Tears of the Kingdom, right? So like the whole like daily updates, or like they were in early access, they're cleaning up some of the features, right? Like they are doing their own testing to determine like the emulation state and how it's working, or if there are bugs or anything like that. So nothing in that is like, oh, by the way, if you have access to this, we'll give you, the keys or whatever to this game that's coming out. That's not really how that works, but it's what they won with. So Yuzu is agreeing with them in some rights, right? Because they just they complied with the suit. It says in a proposed final judgment and permanent injunction document, the settlement terms will forbid the distribution of Yuzu in all of its forms while shutting down its website and other services. So like Citra, right? That's the 3DS emulator. That's getting caught in the crossfire as well, like the language in the court documents. And yes, the Discord, you cannot make comments in. Eventually, that'll get shut down. Um, the repository is shut down for Citra and Yuzu. Like, it's an immediate cease and desist. That, as reported, who did that report earlier that I first took note of? Oatmeal Dome said that it was a mutual, which I found very funny, right? Because something that is mutual is between equal parties, right? Like there's nothing equal about you know, the development team over this Tropic Haze in Nintendo. There's nothing equal. So it's they're like, hey, we're going to go ahead and accept this and move on. But well, I'm gonna table that because it's a very important reason why they, are doing, I think, going about it how they're going about it. Now, as Nintendo previously noted in its legal complaint before, it not only wanted monetary damages from the lawsuit, but also wanted to eliminate Yuzu's existence entirely, including taking control of its domain and social media accounts. So, like, I don't know what Nintendo is intending with that part, but the actual Yuzu's websites, its social media presence, the name Yuzu itself, like all of that stuff, Nintendo as part of the suit. And I don't think that's been verified yet and is finalized, but all of that would now belong to Nintendo. So they don't even want it gone. They're like, we're gonna own it and then make sure it's gone, right? So that's the wildest. And so you can see, as you can see here, Oatmeal Dome was dropping this information. Great to see that it was that they were referenced here. Now this comes from Yuzu today, I believe, right? Yeah. So it says, hello, Yuzers and Citra fans. We write today to inform you that Yuzu and Yuzu's support of Citra are being discontinued effective immediately. Yuzu and its team have always been against piracy. We started the projects in good faith out of passion for Nintendo and its consoles and games, and we were not intending to cause harm. But we see now that because our projects can circumvent Nintendo's technological protection measures and allow users to play games outside of authorized hardware, they have led to extensive piracy. In particular, we have been deeply disappointed when users have used our software to leak game content prior to its release and ruin the experience for legitimate purchasers and fans. We have come to the decision that we cannot continue to allow this to occur. Piracy was never our intention, and we believe that piracy of video games and on video game consoles should end. Effective today, we will be putting our code repositories offline, discontinuing our Patreon accounts and Discord servers, and soon shutting down our websites. We hope our actions will be a small step toward ending piracy of all creators' works. Thank you for your years of support and for understanding our decision. So, just off the rip, what are you thinking? I'll just give you a moment here. It seems contrived, right? That's very legal. That's legalese, right? This is something they definitely 100% have to write in the way that they've written it. Right here, they're saying that it wasn't their intent, right? But the argument from Nintendo is that it is their intent to create piracy. So you see what I'm saying? Like even in their statement here, they're both agreeing with Nintendo and disagreeing at the same time. That's why I say that it's a contrived statement, you know. But you know what are they gonna do? It says first released in 2018, Yuzu is an open source Nintendo Switch emulator developed using C++. It has been used to emulate numerous Switch games shortly after release. The topic of hardware emulation remains fraught, with some game preservation experts advocating for the emulation of older platforms that have been discontinued. Which even that is still a gray area. Just because the platform's discontinued doesn't mean that everybody's, you know, the copyright holder or whatever is going to be okay with it. The Switch, for its part, is expected to remain Nintendo's main platform until at least 2025 and has suffered a notable piracy platform for much of its existence. And that's what I meant. Like Nintendo kind of always has had that going on. And it was predominantly for like their like cartridge based stuff, but I don't know, people love their Nintendo product, so and they want to play it beyond, you know, what the hardware that Nintendo usually makes their games on, right? Like most people who were going to do emulation instead of playing on their console would be playing on their PC because they could get you know, better resolution, better frame rates, etc., without having to go and physically do all of those things to make that possible. Like there are tools to upscale and do all those sorts of things on the actual hardware. But for, you know, the people that have, you know, had those PCs and how it was set up, they got like Tears of the Kingdom, for example, people were running it at like 4K above 30 FPS without, you know, dipping below that mark, right? So their experience of Tears of the Kingdom was far more stable than, you know, someone using the console and then it dropping to 20 frames a second and then jumping around, right? Like, so that's the main reason for like legitimate users, you know, emulating their games. But this focus isn't on that, right? It's the fact that it's saying Yuzu intended to like create this balloon of piracy, and Yuzu is like agreeing and disagreeing at the same time, right? Nintendo is doing what a company would do to protect its investment, right? Like, so I'm not here to try to convince you one way or the other that Nintendo is horrible or whatever. They are functioning as the juggernaut company that they are, and they're not doing anything any different than, say, Apple, Sony, Samsung, you know what I'm saying? Like, because up until this point, there are other Switch emulators, right? They only decided for right now to come after Yuzu, and they specified like, yo, you're making this, you're taking away sales even further, right, from the Switch and from the 3DS. Is the 3DS still going? Is that still a thing, or is it just the Switch now? It's Nintendo v. Tropic Haze out of the District Court of Rhode Island. Says this matter came before the court on the parties' joint motion for entry of final judgment and permanent injunction, right? Like, so, you know, permanent rules that you're going to have to adhere to coming out of this. And by the way, this is a settlement. You technically don't have precedent with this. I'm being very specific. You technically don't, because they settled out of court, but it still has a lot of implication, right? The court makes the following findings of fact. Nintendo of America markets and distributes electronic video game consoles, games, and accessories developed by Nintendo Company Limited. That's going to be Nintendo, including the Switch. The Switch and those games contain technological measures that effectively control access to copyrighted works and protect rights of copyright owners, including Nintendo. Nintendo owns valid copyrights in works protected by those measures, including its video games and its operating system. Yuzu, a video game emulator, circumvents those measures and allows for the play of encrypted Switch games on devices other than the Switch. For example, Yuzu executes code that decrypts those video games, including component files, immediately before and during runtime using unauthorized copies of Switch cryptographic keys. Yuzu is primarily designed to circumvent and play Nintendo Switch games. So like this is the court making that a fact. Boom. So that's where they got that language from. The court's done with the hearing and they're like, this is Yuzu's purpose, is to get around the measures and the keys and everything like that. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but like how the emulator is working is, I think on the other, like you have to dump your game. So dumping is going through a software process with your physical Switch and your physical game and running that through a program like InDump or whatever. And the only way that you can play your games on the other emulator, for example, is that you have to do that dump because that dump has your keys. With Yuzu, the argument that they're making is that Yuzu is doing that legwork for you, thereby making it easier for people to just go and get illegal copies of the game, like the ROM or whatever, and just play it straight up, like because Yuzu is doing that work for you, is helping you to circumvent that. I believe that's the understanding for what the court is deciding. It says in the ordinary course of its operation with those games, Yuzu requires the Nintendo Switch's proprietary cryptographic keys to gain access and to play those games. Developing or distributing software, including Yuzu, that in its ordinary course functions only when the keys are integrated without authorization. It violates the DMCA, that's the Digital Millennium Copyrights Act, prohibition on trafficking in devices that circumvent effective technological measures because the software is primarily designed for the purpose of circumventing those measures. So we're coming back to the DMCA. It still is the case. It doesn't, it prohibits you messing with the code essentially, right? And it's a 30-year-old document, chat. Okay, so I'm not saying that the document in this instance is wrong. I am saying that it is sorely outdated for how much has changed within 30 years in technology. It says, now therefore, so the conclusion, right? That's the therefore. It is hereby ordered that the plaintiff is awarded judgment against the defendant in the amount of $2.4 million. Each party will bear its own costs and attorney's fees. So they're just going to keep that separate. They're like, we just want, we know what we want. We'll get the money, but we're gonna shut this whole show down. It says, in addition, pursuant to sections 502 and 1203 of the Copyright Act, it is hereby ordered that a permanent injunction is entered against the defendant, enjoining it and its members, agents, servants, employees, independent contractors, successors, assigns, and all those acting in privity or under its control. Right, so it's saying you can offer to the public, providing, marketing, advertising, promoting, selling, testing, hosting, cloning, distributing, or otherwise trafficking in Yuzu or any source code or features of Yuzu. Now, offering to the public, providing, marketing, advertising, promoting, doing all that stuff again in other software or devices that circumvent Nintendo's technical protection measures, including without limitation by using unauthorized copies of their proprietary keys to decrypt Nintendo's video games. Wow. So they're saying not only Yuzu, but like any other software that functions in that way. Like this is how Yuzu actually functions, right? Because I know you're thinking, but what about that other emulator or all that? They didn't bring that up. Like they're talking about how Yuzu operates. says directly or indirectly infringing or causing, enabling, facilitating, encouraging, promoting, inducing, or participating in the infringement of any of Nintendo's copyrights, trademarks, or other IP, or they're now in existence or in the future, including but not limited to the unauthorized reproduction, display, public performance, or distribution of any of Nintendo's copyrighted games or OSs, which includes the emulation of Nintendo's games. Committing any other violation of their IPs worldwide, whether now or in the future. You have to be specific in your court language. Affecting assignments or transfers, forming new entities or associations, or using any other device for the purpose of circumventing or otherwise avoiding the prohibitions set forth in subparagraphs A through C. So that right there, we don't even want to see you guys come up with anything else that even remotely looks like emulation, right? Like, the court further enjoins, right, holds to bear all third parties acting in active concert and participation with the defendant from doing all that, like I said before, like trafficking Yuzu or any source code of it, or circumventing their protection measures, etc. And then it says it further enjoins them with everyone really connected to them, including but not limited to any domain name registrars or registries holding or listing their website, from supporting or facilitating access to any or all domain names, URLs, websites, including any successor websites, chat rooms, or other social media websites or apps through which its members trafficked or continue to traffic in circumvention devices or software that those members infringed or continue to infringe Nintendo's Copyright Act or the DMCA. So, like, this is why they're having to shut down everything, right? What was interesting is that, like, they mentioned the registrars or registries that are holding it. So, like, they're even involving, like, if they were using like GoDaddy or InMotion hosting or something like that, right? Like, they were saying, like, yeah, we're even gonna make sure like they can't be hosting a website. Like, they have to give all of that up. Like, they have to shut all of that down, right? Like, your webs, like, if you're the host of like where these like keys are being distributed or like games are being distributed, the keys are really the main issue here. But like, they're like, yeah, like, that's not gonna fly either, which is weird because like there's so many other, right, like, it's the internet, so there's so many other potential places where those kinds of things rest. So like, they're just saying, you know, for what you guys have, and clearly they're there, right? So they're saying that they can't have access to those. It says it further orders that the defendant and all those involved surrender and permanently cease to use the domain name, any variant or successor, or any other website, and to the extent the domain is under the defendant or others, that it will immediately transfer the domain name and those rights or whatever to Nintendo. So that's how that works. Like, this is all coming down from the, like, how the court is proceeding with this, or what it's agreed to. So, right, all of this is within the power of Nintendo. And so, of course, both parties agree, and then the court is like, sure, right? Like, that's, we'll put our stamp of approval on that. The court further orders the destruction by deletion of all circumvention devices, including all copies of Yuzu, all the tools used for developing or using Yuzu. Now, here's like the Tegra RCM GUI, Hecate Atmosphere Lockpick RCM, the ND dump tool. That's what I was mentioning earlier. The NX Dump Fuse and Tegra Explorer, and all copies of Nintendo's cryptographic keys, including the prod keys, because those are Those are the ones that are doing the legwork there, those prod keys. And all other electronic material within their custody, possession, or control that violate Nintendo's rights, right? Like the dumping tools, all that stuff that they were essentially using to make the emulator possible, and by extension were then like shared with others to use. So they're gonna have to hand over modded switches. Because the thing about the Switch, right? Like the newer versions of the console do not do this. Okay, like you cannot dump from a new Switch. So this is also, I believe, Nintendo's thinking behind how they decided, because how are you getting that uptick in the illegal use of the game before its release when like that many people, they're really making the case that many people with the original Switch aren't within the Yuzu community to even use it to emulate the game. With the exception of what we just read, the court further enjoins them from destroying, transferring, altering, moving, returning, concealing, or any manner hiding that material, including the game consoles, the games, the ROMs, the emulators, all that stuff. It says this permanent injunction constitutes a binding court order, and any violations of it will subject them to the full scope of this court's contempt authority, including punitive, coercive, and monetary sanctions. So, yeah, they're gonna do it, right? I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, you guys just gave up," and they're like, "Look, they're already getting us for our project and for the $2.4 million, right? We don't want to pay any more of that." And I mean, they said since 2018. Now I'm just gonna do a roundabout. Let me see here, because I think you're gonna see that on the screen. No. So they're saying they're getting like $30K a month, 2018 to 2024, 6 years. So if we take, so that's 72 months, we're gonna go and multiply that out. Because you're wondering where they're getting 2.4 million from, give or take, right? Like, where's that number coming from? Well, if you take the 30K and you multiply that out, that comes up to $2.16 million. So that's where they got the number from that I'm making the case for. If it were just about Tears of the Kingdom, this number wouldn't work, right? The 2.16. Because wasn't Tears of the Kingdom $70? They said 1 million times. A million times. They brought up that Tears of the Kingdom had been pirated before release 1 million times. So if you just took that all together, that's $70 million. So that's how you know this, for them, the $70 million hails to getting this tool to effectively shut down for 2.4, which is roughly what they were getting in their Patreon. So they just multiplied it out. And they're like, and that's how we'll end you. We'll take all of the money that you have been getting over the course of development through the early access program, and then we'll just shut this whole thing down. That's what that is. It's like they're just rolling it back. This permanent injunction is binding against the defendant worldwide without regard to the territorial scope of the specific IP. So they were like, we tried you in a United States federal court. You're not going to be able to just, go overseas and somewhere else and like do it again and think that you're safe from this judgment that has been meted out here today. The plaintiff is not required to post any bond or security in connection with the final judgment. It is further ordered that judgment enter in this matter in accordance with the terms set forth above. It is so ordered. Just clear cut. Tropic Haze is done in that way. And this user says, "I love the new moralization of pirating, where we all just agreed to call it preservation. This case seems pretty cut and dry with them making 30 grand a month and giving pirating tutorials in their Discord. Honestly, they probably still have tons of money left over at this point. For me personally, I've never seen them give tutorials on how to pirate. I don't think I've ever seen that. I saw them say quite the opposite, actually. This is the actual original document here that I got off Scribed. This is the one that gets the ball rolling. That's why it's so long. It says a defendant is an entity that owns, develops, and operates Yuzu, a video game emulator for Nintendo Switch games. A game emulator is a piece of software that allows users to unlawfully play pirated video games that were published only for a specific console on a general purpose computing device. Right, so they're talking about your PC. Now, mind you, even that, as they're saying it, is the scope of those who don't have the game. Yuzu allows Switch games, which Nintendo authorizes for play solely on Switch consoles, to be played on Windows, Linux, or Android. That means that people are able to play pirated Nintendo Switch games on PCs and Android devices, which would not otherwise be possible due to protections that Nintendo has put in place for their consoles. Again, you have to remember the focus here that they're honing in on is the pirated copies, right? Like, I don't know where it's sitting at, but it's over here, off camera. But to make my point here, let me grab it. So I'll show you, because this is the quickest box that I have in front of me. This be the Wii U, right? Because I'm going even back further than the Switch to make a point. This bad boy, I think like I still have like maybe 40 of my games on this thing that I dumped and have it to where I play Breath of the Wild, right? Like that's how I prefer to play it. It's on there. And if I play Breath of the Wild on stream, I take that dump and then I put it through Dolphin so that I can play on stream. Why do I do it that way? It's more convenient. I don't have to go and get a capture card for it and all that other kind of jazz, right? It's just, it's just a direct, and then I can take my save off of there, and then move it over there, and then that's how I play the game if I'm trying to like record it or stream it or whatever. There's an addition here that's brought up that it's played on this general purpose, computing device. Yes, because I own it. I own both. I own the games too. But this language, you have to be clear here that it keeps talking about piracy. And what's so interesting is that I saw earlier people were like, oh, it's lost sales and X, Y, and Z. And Nintendo, as far as I know, and that's why I'm reading this here, never brought that up. They talked about the amount of times that it was downloaded, but they never brought up that we lost money from it. They didn't even sue for that, because it would have been $70 million that they would have sued for. They didn't sue for that. The issue at hand is the fact that it's encouraged, that like it was designed for this, right? That's the language they use. You can't lose money from people you're never going to get it from. This a fact. Like if you have somebody that is going that route and they're never going to pay it doesn't matter how much it is. If they're never going to pay it, you're not losing that money from it. But neither should they be able to enjoy my product, and that's Nintendo's stance and argument. So TPMs is the technological protection measures to protect their IPs and investments and all that stuff. Like they put security keys, right? Features on there that are meant to prevent people from playing those copies elsewhere, right? Like they'll even region locks, for example. So even if you're using it on like a legitimate Switch, and then you take your copy meant for North America and try to play that on a console meant for Europe or like one for like Japan, for example, something like that, the TPMs are in place for that not to work because they sell different copies of the game. So like even that is involved with it. Okay. Specifically, every Nintendo Switch video game stored on a physical cartridge or on a Switch console as a digital download is secured with TPMs, including encryption that scrambles the audio-visual content in the game file to make it unreadable without the cryptographic keys. They're referred to as the prod keys to decrypt other keys with the game and then use those to decrypt lawfully purchased games during runtime. So we're talking about the prod keys. Yuzu unlawfully circumvents those measures that allows for the play of encrypted Switch games on devices other than the Switch. Yuzu does this by executing code necessary to defeat Nintendo's many TPMs with its games, including code that decrypts the Switch video games files immediately before and during runtime using an illegally obtained copy of prod keys. Users obtain the prod keys either through unlawful websites or by unlawfully hacking the console. Again, that's where they're trying to land this ship. What I want to bring up here, and this because it's a 40-page document, so I'm not even going to make you suffer that. But what I have is a document that was uploaded earlier on Imager that's talking about, this was 6 days ago, why you should avoid a Yuzu. And it was talking about the character of the team behind it and how like the writing was on the wall, so to speak. And this is why I want to end this and land it because as you can see in there, I got to hop off here. It says they have a hardcore anti-piracy stance and even a spammer bot in their Discord. Yuzu is legal. We don't support illegal activities. Dumping your purchased games and system files from your Switch is legal. Downloading them is not. And at the same time, have a Google Drive folder for devs full of pirated ROMs, and despite them raking in plenty of cash to buy their games. It says, have you heard about the new Xenoblade? I don't give a fuck about Xenoblade. Well, we have to download it. Okay, use the stash. How big is it? 14 gigs. This will take a while. So it's showing, this is a screenshot of downloading, not from their Switch or dumping it, but from a repository in Discord, right? Because that's the thing or whatever, or how is it? But that's what it looks like. As always, thanks for this awesome stash. So these are members, right, associated with the team. It says they got greedy and worked with a sketchy Nintendo online clone and tried to implement online play as a Patreon exclusive feature. When they found out this was illegal, they removed it the same day they launched it. Can you give us the contact info for your lawyer? Why? A reference. I'm sorry. I meant for what reference? It'd be nice to have something to reference against this. And they're talking about the legal issues. Do you not believe I actually have a lawyer? Like, I'm confused on why you need this info. Are you planning on litigating me in the near future? They want to protect themselves. Nope, just for reference. Then sorry, but no. Then we are saddened to report that we have removed online support for Yuzu indefinitely and effective immediately. We apologize to our community for the confusion and disappointment surrounding this release, and especially to those who were excited to try this feature. We have received valid and insightful feedback from our fans and members of the broader Switch and emulation communities. Truthfully, we're all just a bunch of enthusiastic people from around the globe who are genuinely excited about something we thought we could offer. In hindsight, we 100% understand your concerns. As always, we will continue working on other features and improvements within Yuzu to make it the best emulator we possibly can. Thank you to anyone who has huge support. And BSOD is someone on YouTube. And then it brings up the fact that they stole code from the other emulator developers. And so you can pull it up as well. It says they have delayed updates for Patreon bucks and wasted months of time on the Patreon exclusive online that got shut down. And then it says here, the major emulator YouTuber is in private communication with Yuzu, and they frequently exchange favors and potentially money. So that's neither here nor there. Note that his affiliation with Yuzu has not been disclosed and may constitute sponsorship, and not disclosing that is illegal under U.S. law. Right, you know, anytime, especially on YouTube, when you go and upload something and you're making a video about something, it'd be like an item or a device or something like that. if it's actually something worked out on the back end, you're getting paid for it or you're getting something for it. And in reality, it's an advert or a sponsorship. You have to disclose that. If you don't, it is 100% illegal. Just because of the nature of social media and all that kind of stuff in particular, right? And then this is them, cleaning that up and on the back end saying, hey, no one noticed, otherwise it looks good. Hey, my video is gone. It got privated, right? So like they're in concert in these conversations on the back end. Again, this was brought up as far as like some of the proceedings that went into like why Nintendo moved in the way that they did and rip Yuzu. But I want to make that to show like why that was the case. Like, where did that number come from? 2.4 million, right? Because I'm like, well, if Tears of the Kingdom was what was really at stake, I would doubt that Nintendo would settle for 2.4 million versus getting 70 or just putting it on paper, right? No, they went after everything that they got from making it, and the money is tying together how Nintendo is able to say from the beginning they were always intending to circumvent what we were doing. The evidence is that they were making money off of it and putting that behind a specific build and early access with certain features. And so we're going to take all the money and we're going to take all the projects. And so the reason I'm ending with that is because what people are asking now, like, well, what about the other emulator? If the other emulator is functioning the same way, quite honestly, it's going to have the same fate. Nintendo has been allowing these to go for some time. And it got to a point where when Tears of the Kingdom came out, they said, well, that's enough. Let's figure out like how this happened, why it's working the way that it's working. They're being compensated for what they were doing, right? It's not a donation to the project for the preservation of Switch games. That's not what happened. And that's what they're saying will happen with Yuzu, and they misstepped. So, I'm not for the other emulator, like I don't represent it or anything like that, but I'm saying like that's why you're hearing about Yuzu at this point and not anything else. So, but we've gone through it. It's still just like just to see something get like just disintegrate like in a moment. But that's what it is, man. So for everyone that was using Yuzu to work off of their potato PCs, like that effectively ends emulation because the other one is like more accurate and you need more horsepower to make it work. So that's the reason people were using Yuzu in particular, is because like even for its emulation, it was an inaccurate emulation to make it run on as many things as possible. There's just a whole litany of things going on for why that's happening. But yeah, it ripped to Yuzu. So that's all I had to come up for. That's all I got time for. So thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, it's been Agent R. Be the meta, prove your meta. Peace.